Are you curious about when you need to change the strings on your guitar? Are you interested in learning how to actually change the strings on your guitar? I'm going to cover today how to do those tasks for a classical guitar. If this is interesting to you, please stay tuned. The first question that you will need to answer is it time to change the strings on your guitar? And there's 4 things that I typically think about when considering that. The first one is an obvious one, which is the strings will actually break, or one of them will break, so then you really need to just go ahead and replace all of them. Another thing would be that the sound is not as good. It might not be as loud, or it's just not the same as new strings. And then the third item is the guitar is not staying in tune, meaning you're constantly tuning and tuning and tuning, and it just keeps going out of tune a lot quicker than it maybe previously had. The last item, number 4, is visible damage to the strings. So if you see little nicks and just it looks like it's damaged, you'll notice it if you look closely at the strings. And if you see that, that can be another indicator that it's time to change the strings. And there's an interesting piece of information that I have heard in the past, which is you don't really need to change the strings necessarily on a nylon string guitar that often. Again, it comes back to what do you want your sound to be? And this has been something that a lot of people think about. They want to have good sound, so then they change their strings more frequently. I've actually heard something about some people change their strings every 2 or 3 weeks if they're playing a lot. For me, it's been about 6 months since I changed the strings on my guitar. So that for me seems to be a pretty good time frame, anywhere between 4 and 6 months based on the level that I'm playing. So for each person that might be a little bit different. If you like this video, I hope that you will like, comment, or subscribe so that you can be the first to see my next videos as they come out. Thanks. The next question that I want to answer is, what strings do you use for your guitar? I have this Cordoba classical guitar behind me, and it's a nylon string. So I know that I need to use only nylon strings that are made for this type of guitar. So I need to order strings for that specifically. And the thing that I want to make sure people understand is that you don't want to mix classical nylon string, you don't want to mix your classical guitar with other types of strings, because if you put steel strings on this guitar, the whole guitar will bow, because the guitar is actually made differently than it is for a steel string guitar. So never mix up the two, always steel string on steel string and nylon string on nylon string. And today I'll be talking through the process of how to change the strings on this Cordoba behind me. For this video today, you will need a guitar that needs its string changed, which in this case I had a string break. Then I have a tuner, a set of wire cutters, you could also use scissors, and then a new set of strings. When I open the box for the strings, you can see I have 6 different strings. So just make sure that you know which string is going to go where, and I'll talk about that as we begin the process. For changing the strings on the guitar, the first one is you'll need to loosen the strings or unwind them a bit so they're not so tight, because if you try to clip those strings, they'll kind of fly all over the place. So just be careful when you're clipping those. The next thing you want to do is remove and cut off all of the strings from the guitar. Then you want to, once you have all the strings off, it's a good time to clean the guitar off and just wipe it down with a cloth. Make sure you use a microfiber type of cloth and clean it off before you begin with the new strings. The third step is make sure you know the order of the strings that you need this extra set of strings available to put on, but make sure you know what the order is. So you're going to be looking at, like for this guitar, what is for me is the top, this side here is you're gonna start 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and that is how you would be putting the strings on. Before you take them out of the package, either the package should be labeled or there should be a label on the string itself telling you which string and what the note is for that. I lay them out, so I have them in order, and I'm starting over here with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Then you're going to take the strings out of the package and make sure that you know which string is for what. So if it's in a package that's labeled, don't take it out of the package until you're actually ready to put it on the guitar, because you might get it confused with other strings because they do look similar, especially when you get down to the smaller strings on this guitar. You could get a couple of them mixed up, so make sure you have the right ones. Then you're going to start with tying the strings off at the bottom of the guitar here, and then stretching it up and putting it in the appropriate spot at the top. And then you will loop around the top and then start winding. Make sure you leave maybe 4 or 5 inches of slack in that, so then when you're winding, you have something to wind with. Leave enough room, but don't leave too much either. Kind of a happy medium there. Here I'm showing how at the headstock you'll feed the string in through the hole on the tuning peg. And then for nylon strings, for most of the strings, they're pretty small. So you'll loop that around and then put it back through the hole a second time in order to make it more secure. And then from there you can start turning the tuning pegs, which you're going to turn in a clockwise direction. And then from there you should be able to tighten up the string. Make sure you leave 4 or 5 inches of space so that you'll have plenty of string to be able to wind around the tuning peg. Once you have all the strings on, you've tied them all and you've wound them over and tightened them enough, then at that point you would trim all the ends of all of the strings once you're happy what it looks like on the bridge when you have all of the new strings tied and trimmed, and what that would look like. And then the last step will be tuning, and tuning will be a little bit time consuming because it's not even close to being in tune, so be prepared to just take a few minutes to do that. What happens after you change the strings on the guitar, you will definitely have to tune it a lot over the next day or two, and that's because the strings need to stretch and relax. So just anticipate that, be patient. One thing that some people will do is they'll tune it on the high side. So then by the time they come back to it next time, it's not quite as much out of tune. You could try that to help mitigate how much time you're going to have to keep tuning. The other thing that you can do is check out my video on changing your guitar strings and what happens afterward, because I think you might get a little bit entertained out of that, and then you'll see what happened to me when I changed the strings the last time around. I hope this video was helpful to you. If you like this video, I hope that you will like, comment, or subscribe so that you can be the first to see my next videos as they come out. Thanks.